All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to our conversation with Jonathan Allen and Amie Parnes, moderated by Colleen King, Professor Colleen King, I might add. Allen is an award-winning senior national politics reporter for NBC News, and he covers presidential campaigns, the White House, Congress, and national political issues. Parnes is a senior political correspondent covering national politics at The Hill. She's also worked as a staff writer at Politico, and during the first Trump administration, she was a CNN political analyst. Today, they're going to be speaking about their fourth and latest book, Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, which is a New York Times bestseller. In this book, Parnes and Allen provide an inside look at the Biden, Harris, and Trump camps during the 2024 battle for the presidency.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, it's so fun to be here. What a great campus. I'd never been here before.
Same. I mean, I agree with all of that. It's a beautiful, awesome campus with amazing people, and also I've never been here before.
So about a year ago, this book came out and hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. You two were not intending to write a book about the 2024 campaign. Amy, maybe you can tell us how this came about.
Yeah, so we had written 2 other political books on campaigns specifically. We'd written 3 books in total. One on the 2016 election called Shattered, one on the 2020 election called Lucky. And we weren't going to do another campaign book. We thought, okay, how much more can we do of this? You know, the election seemed at the time kind of predictable a little bit. And people kept, the funniest part is we had this one source in particular who kept asking us, like, why aren't you guys doing this? Like, it's stupid. You guys are like everyone's waiting for you guys to write another one. And we said, we're not going to. And then the June debate happens, and Joe Biden, you know, I don't need to tell you guys what happened, but we started to field phone calls, and our agent texted us one day and said, I've just gotten a query from your publisher asking if you like to do another book. And I didn't even check with John. I immediately just wrote back and said, yes, we would do it. Because I knew he would want to do it too.
Yeah, definitely. There was a story all of a sudden. Yeah. So you all talked to John, more than 150 sources for this book. Biden White House, Biden campaign, Trump campaign, then Harris campaign. Can you talk a little bit about how you talk to sources on background and what that means in your reporting?
Yeah, so what we've found has been effective in these campaign books is that we sort of establish a set of rules with sources that put them in a position where they're not going to feel like they are inadvertently affecting the outcome if they talk to us before the election. And so what we have to be able to do is gain their trust that they won't tell us something in September and have us report it in September for a book that comes out in April. And so what we do is we make an agreement with each of the sources that they will be on background, that we're not going to quote them by name, but we'll use some of the things that they say, we'll quote some of the things they say, and explain who they are. A source close to Kamala Harris, or a Republican insider who worked on 3 presidential campaigns or something like that. And then we also promise them that we will not put the information out before the election, which allows us a little bit of latitude for promotion of the book. You know, the election was in November. The book came out April 1st, and in January we'll put out a little bit of a little squib, a little leak on what's in the book to try to promote it. So by saying to them we won't put anything out before the election, it means that they can be sure that that it won't inadvertently affect or negatively affect the candidate that they want. For some people, especially the ones that have worked with us before, that's typically fine, and they'll talk to us a little bit more in real time. It's never really real time. I mean, it's very seldom that we are getting stuff for the book, literally in the minutes or hours after some event. But usually within a couple of weeks, we'll start doing some reporting. Some sources are much more reluctant to talk until after the election. One source in particular that turned out to be a very key source texted the morning of the election. Somebody who was involved in the Harris effort texted the morning of the election, and we'd been pursuing this person for a long time. And they said, "I'll talk to you for your book." And I immediately texted Amy, and I was like, "Kamala Harris is going to lose," because my
This is election day morning.
This was somebody, yeah, this is election day morning, and somebody, and like the fact that this person was like anxious to like sort of get on the record with me that you know, that they would talk with us, seemed to be putting a placeholder of, I'm going to want to explain this.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I could have been wrong about what that meant, but I immediately interpreted it that way.
Yeah, and you two work for different news organizations, so how does it work with protecting what's for the book versus what's for your day job?
I think luckily, Colleen, what happens is, as John said, a lot of what we do happens after the election. But we also have sort of like a rule where if we're talking to sources together, it means that it's for the book. People think we also sit on information. We generally don't at all. Yeah. No one wants to talk about the campaign until the campaign is over. And so we started writing the book in July, but really the bulk of the book wasn't done until November, and we had to turn in the entire thing in January, if you can believe it, which is insane. Like I think
it was
about
December was our.
Like
it was not
December.
good. It was not good. It was not good at all.
Don't ever do it.
And what's your process? How do you two write? Like, you live in different cities?
Can I say we just throw shit against the wall? No. We work in a shared document, and we work together. And like I write a little bit, and then Amy will be like, I don't really like that, and she'll edit it or like re-go over it, or she'll write a little bit, and I'll be like, oh, what if we did this? And we discuss it, and we almost all of the communication is typed. But we're like, you know, if you went into one of our files, you would see like a story taking shape, and then you'd see like 12 minutes of like, or many paragraphs of discussion of like everything from like, where does this need to go, to who do we need to talk to who do we hate in Washington, to to what kind of music we're listening to whether Remy needs to go to bed, like the whole sort of thing, and then we like clean it up so that if anyone ever excavates these things, they don't look as bad. But basically,
it's also like a lot of therapy. Like, I hate life. Yeah. How are you feeling today?
And then like I always give us like a word count at the end of the day. I'm like, all right, we now have 6,000 words for this book, only like 80,000 left. Because like in my mind, like I don't accept that we're actually going to finish a book until we finish it. And I try to keep in my mind, like, what is the pace at which we're putting stuff out? Like, where do we need to be on target to finish these things? Mm-hmm. I'm super stressed about that all the time. Yeah. And Amy is super stressed about quality. And I think that works pretty well together. I also, but I mean, it is an unusual way that we do this. I mean, I think we saw each other, we were actually in the same place for an interview with a source once during the entire making of that book. Most of it by phone, by Zoom. You know, I think the pandemic, as it changed life for everybody, it really changed the way that we did our interviews. Mm-hmm. We really, in the past tried at least to be a little more in person with sources, and it just wasn't possible during. So our 2021 book, Lucky, about the 2020 election, we didn't see each other at all. I never saw that book in a bookstore, which is like so sad. Like if you put out a book and you never get to see it in a store, it's heartbreaking. I mean, there are many more heartbreaking things in the world. Some of you got B's when you deserved A's, but it is a difficult thing to deal with.
Well, I reread the book this week leading up to your visit, and it's phenomenal. It still holds very true. Amy mentioned the debate. Obviously, that was the catalyst for everything. But I'm going to fast forward from that moment to October of 2024, because you two write that this is a really momentous time when Trump regains the lead in polls, Jonathan. It's like October 26th. It's about 10 days out from the election, and the momentum kind of shifts in that final week and a half there. Can you tell us a little bit about what was going on?
Yeah, I think, what happens is the polls tend to trail reality just a little bit. I think if you looked at all the information that both campaigns had, you would see that Biden gets out, Harris gets in. That's at the I guess, toward the tail end of July. She has the Democratic convention, and she's got a ton of momentum, and she's doing well in the polls. Then Trump survives an assassination attempt, and they have the Republican convention after the Democratic convention, and what you see with her is like this sort of rise and then a plateau. And she never really gets to a place where she has like a commanding lead. And then you see her fall apart some ways in her own, out of her own shortcomings, and in some ways the campaigning of the Trump campaign. So a couple of big things that I think were pretty clear. She didn't have a message about what she was going to do if she took over the presidency to make people's lives better. She wasn't able to separate herself from the Biden presidency in a way that suggested that she would do anything differently, and in fact literally went on television and had difficulty saying that she would do anything differently. We saw that interview on The View. I think everybody saw those clips. But it wasn't just limited to that. In fact, in September there had been a debate. That interview on The View, I think, was in early October. In the September debate with Trump, he had made that point. He had made the point that she didn't have any differences from Biden. And I think that we also watch the debates in ways that don't necessarily comport with reality. I mean, you watch a debate and you judge it on the sort of merits, and you're like, all right, well, she sounded reasonable and she seemed in command of her, her faculties, and Trump was, a little more angry and a little more erratic, and you like try to judge like in sort of a like an educational environment, debate society way, like who won the debate, and you're like, okay, well, Kamala Harris won this debate, except for Donald Trump pointed out some of the big shortcomings, in particular, her not having anything different from Biden. But the other thing was the ad. You guys remember the transgender ad? Where the Trump campaign hit her on essentially 5 issues at once. I think it was 5. But basically, she was for taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries for undocumented immigrants. And it's like for them, it is the, for lack of a better term, like the erogenous zone of like what's wrong with Democrats, right? Like they found that spot, and they're like, okay, so, and then the incredible tagline, Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. And she didn't have an answer for that, because it was true, because she had supported this thing. And she also didn't fight back. And she didn't have allies willing to fight back. And one of the things that Democrats are kind of going through in their autopsies right now is, and it was very much in this book, is there were outside Democratic groups that had a ton of money that sat on the sidelines and did not, sort of give her air cover, did not fight back against some of these messages. But I think those were 2 of the big things. And so you see her plateau and then just never get to the point where she needs to be to win, and then sort of trail off toward the end. And Kamala Harris's argument she makes in her book, 107 Days, and by the way, I think she very much overperformed a lot of expectations. And I think she was a better candidate than even many people in her own party expected her to be. That said, she believes that if she had had more time, she would have won. And the numbers show that that's just not true, that she was losing altitude at the end, and that Trump was gaining altitude at the end. So I'll stop there, but I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. And then, Amy, can you pair that with what was going on the right, which you write about? There was like a nostalgia for the Trump presidency that didn't match how people felt during the Trump presidency. Like they looked back on it more fondly than they felt in the moment.
Yeah, I think the term was Trump amnesia. Everyone kept talking about that at the time, but people forgot about COVID and the dark days. They thought about the times before that, when the economy was good and strong jobs and just a healthy economy. And I know a few people, some in my family even, who were like, yeah, what was wrong with that? It was great. It was great. And forgetting about the fact that, everything seemed like it was a mess, including COVID.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people wanted that time back in a lot of ways and felt fondly toward it. And there are people who would talk to me and say, there is just some reason I can't vote for her. And they couldn't really articulate why. And I'm still fascinated. I know some people who felt that way, and I still kind of am curious about why. And I have to draw the conclusion that some of it was sexism.
Was that different than what you were hearing about Hillary Clinton when she ran?
Some of the same, actually. Some of the same sort of views about, are we ready for it? I don't quite like her, but I don't know why. And I think a lot of those reasons kind of played out in the way that it did.
Yeah. Well, John, you've covered multiple presidencies, and this one's very different than all the other ones you've covered. Can you talk a little bit about covering a White House under Trump versus under others?
I mean, what's fascinating is it's different than even the first Trump presidency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the White House and the cabinet are much more disciplined in this Trump White House, at least in terms of policy, as compared to where they were in the past. Like the first time around, a lot of the people in his cabinet were trying to change his mind or put up guardrails for like what he wanted to do. And this time around, the White House and the cabinet is generally trying to implement the things that he wants and soften the edges to some extent of the president himself. But like it is really kind of focused, and they've been able to do quite a lot. I mean, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, whatever they call it, actually had a lot of really important policy, including putting together basically several years of DHS funding into one bill that it wasn't even really like an appropriations bill. They just jacked up the funding for DHS so that they could do this mass deportation campaign. And we saw that in Los Angeles, and we saw it in Chicago, and we saw it in Minneapolis. And that doesn't begin to get at the tax cuts and the other things that were in that bill. Some of the things the president has done by executive order have been kept by the courts. Others have been thrown out by the courts. But we are seeing a president who has moved very fast in a direction and has had essentially the full support of his own administration in a way that he didn't the first time. The president himself is different in that, I mean, come on, I don't, like, you guys know, like, this is different. Like, it's just different. There's, like, policies change on a whim. There's no real policy process. This is a president who decides, I'm going left on Monday and I'm going right on Tuesday. And maybe sometimes within 10 minutes of each other, or just sort of likes the feeling of chaos as something that he can take advantage of, because if other people are on their heels, he can then choose which direction to go. So in some ways, there's I resist the idea that 3D chess is being played all the time, but I think when the most powerful player throws the board up in the air and all the pieces land again, they're the best positioned to take advantage of all the tumult. And I think that's a principle that he understands. I don't think it always works in the way that he wants it to.
Yeah.
He went to war in Iran. That has not gone the way that he wanted it to. Certainly, Iran has been, devastated militarily, but they also took the Strait of Hormuz, drove up gas prices, made his job harder in terms of domestic political support, even within his own base to some extent. So, courting chaos does not always work. And I think it's one of the reasons other presidents tends to be a little more risk averse.
Mm-hmm. So Amy, you're covering the Democrats for midterm elections in 2028. How are they looking at the war in Iran and the field right now?
I mean, it's very tied to the economy, obviously, and gas prices and food prices. And the midterms will be a tell about where the parties are. I think both parties are kind of going through their own little turmoil. The Democratic Party is sort of figuring out where they are positioning themselves. There is this discussion of whether, they go left, if they've gone too far left, if they've moved back to the center. They're looking at the races, the gubernatorial races that just happened in the fall, as sort of the first kind of temperature check about how candidates can win nationally. And so I think a lot of people, but then people are also pointing at Mamdani in New York and saying, yes, but, the energy of the party, the real energy is on the left. And so I have both sides sort of talking in my ear about who is at a stronger position to win. And so I'm curious to see how that plays out, how the war plays out on the Republican side, and whether J.D. Vance has distanced himself enough in that way to, he wasn't for the war initially. If he can kind of say that, I think you're going to hear that if the war continues to go the way it's going. What Marco Rubio, what's really fascinating is that the president right now is so focused on, obviously, his legacy, especially as time moves on, and who among those two guys will carry his legacy forward. And, if what happens to MAGA, and if, there's sort of a feeling that it's breaking apart right now. And so what happens there, and who is going to carry the torch forward? And he has sort of this horse race going on between the two of them, between Vance and Rubio. And he's polling people, doing his own polling at Mar-a-Lago and elsewhere. I've heard from donors that they get these questions all the time. Who do you like better? Who's better for the party? So who is carrying that favor more, and how Trump is sort of rallying behind whoever ends up, the guy. So many questions. It's going to be fascinating.
John, what are you hearing in D.C. about this, the Iran war, and the midterm implications? And
I mean, I think what's happened with the Iran war on the domestic political front is two things. One, I think you've got a MAGA base that was promised no new wars. And they are largely, when you poll them, they're largely still with Trump, but they did not like the idea of a new foreign war. And I wonder the extent to which that becomes Trump's George H.W. Bush promise. George H.W. Bush in 1988 campaigned and said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And it helped him get the conservatives on his side, and then he raised taxes. Raised taxes because he was worried about deficits. He was worried about trying to balance the budget, or at least trying to keep it from getting a lot worse. And broadly it was popular, but it was terribly unpopular with his base, and they abandoned him in 1992. And I wonder, Trump is not going to run again, but I think
sure?
I am sure that he's not going to run again. I'm 99.9% sure.
That talk has kind of faded, though, don't you think?
That talk has faded. Whether he leaves is another question, but I don't think he's going to run again. Okay, so, but I think there's that the sort of war question for a Republican base that was upset with Iraq and Afghanistan, and that J.D. Vance, despite having served, or maybe because of having served, is reluctant to be pro-war. So there's that piece, and I think that's an interesting piece. But what I think is going to happen in the short term domestically, and what we're watching domestically, is it just makes the Democrats' arguments about the economy more crystallized for the moment. So what they're saying, generally speaking, is that the president has taken his eye off the economy and things are less affordable, and some of the things he is doing are making the world less affordable. And they have a lot of different inputs for that. I would say the other huge one is the tariff policy that he's had. Slapping tariffs on all these other countries where consumers end up paying a lot of that freight. And consumers are paying not just more at the gas pump right now, but for all of the items that you buy that have to be flown here or shipped here, the price of fuel is going up. And for the things that have to be trucked to various places, there are all these sort of knock-on effects of the increased oil prices. So I think you're going to hear Democrats continue to make an affordability argument. The smart ones won't use the word affordability because it's kind of, I don't want to say it's esoteric, but they'll actually talk about gas prices. And when it's not gas prices, they will talk about egg prices. And when it's not egg prices, they'll talk, just like Trump did to Biden. He is reliving the Biden experience where on a macro level, the economy isn't so bad, but every single one of us understands the pinch of things costing more and having less money to pay for them, or at least feeling like that's going on. And so I think you'll hear the Democrats drive that message straight through the midterms, and they will drive it straight through the 2028 election. And if they don't, I think they've made a massive strategic blunder.
Does anybody around Trump think that the Republicans have a chance at keeping any kind of majority?
I don't think anyone believes that they have a chance of keeping the House around Trump. I mean, I am sure there's like, look, there's a Hail Mary, who knows what happens. It's 6 months, we're a long way away. I think they are baking in the idea that, as they make their plans, they're baking in the idea that they're going to lose the House. Now, the Supreme Court, making certain decisions on voting rights could affect redistricting in certain parts. There are a couple of states that still have the potential of redistricting. Right now, if you were to call it, you would have to say the Democrats are overwhelmingly favored to win the House. Again, things can change, and that they are in a reasonably good position to win the Senate, which does not, is not affected by states redrawing their House maps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing more and more optimism from Democrats,
Yeah.
especially lately. I mean, there was a black, dark time around, a few months ago when Democrats still didn't know who their leader was. They didn't have a message. They couldn't articulate what they were for. And elections obviously are about the future.
Yeah.
But you're seeing kind of an optimism in recent weeks. Particularly, the war in Iran is helping them. They just need to figure out. I saw a sticker on a gas pump here that said Trump did this and pointed to the gas prices. And it's like things like that. I think that will ultimately, a message that carries that people can relate to. I think that will ultimately help them. But stay tuned to Maine. That's why they're dumping all this money into this Plattner Collins race, because I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
I also think you can watch Congress for this a little bit. So Congress has chosen a couple of times not to impose a war powers resolution to stop the president from going to war with Iran. But several weeks ago, there was talk about the Pentagon coming to Congress and asking for a $200 billion emergency supplemental funding bill, where basically Congress would spend $200 billion to pay for Iran. And it was dead on arrival. The idea was dead on arrival. So now we're talking about maybe $100 billion and snuck into a bill that does other things, because there aren't the votes in Congress to fund a couple $100 billion for this war. And that tells you where the Republican electorate is, because their own members of Congress are reluctant or unwilling to back a war. And I do not remember the last time a Republican president wanted to go to war and Republicans said no, or said we're a little worried about how much we're supporting this. So I think you've seen a real sea change in Washington in terms of the appetite to spend on foreign wars, especially at a time when Americans are suffering. The other thing that I think is fascinating is the Democrats have this argument that the president wants to cut domestic spending in order to pay for the war. And I don't think anything could be further from the truth. I actually think he wants to do both things, and they are not dependent on each other, but they can be explained that way. And it's interesting to watch the Democrats kind of fall into what would be the president's argument, we're gonna tighten our belts so we can fund the war. And I'm like, no, he cut spending on domestic programs long before the Iran war. We saw him do that in that big, beautiful bill. And also now wants to spend at least $100 billion and probably much more on the Iran war.
Let's talk Illinois politics. What are you hearing about J.B. Pritzker or Rahm Emanuel?
Rahm is surprisingly gaining steam. I just wrote about him recently.
Yeah.
He is in a full-on campaign. It started for him. He had something like 18 stops recently in South Carolina.
Wow.
He was in New Hampshire. He did Politics and Eggs, which you know is a huge event that candidates go to. He is talking like a candidate. I mean, he says he's a candidate in training, but he's doing all the things. The question is, does his term as mayor come back to haunt him? I mean, it was a very controversial mayoral tenure. And so how does that play out? Pritzker, I think, also curious to see how that goes. Obviously, Democrats are very supportive of what he's done here, and I think he desperately wants to run but can't. He's sort of boxed in at the moment. He's obviously focused on 2026 and his own run here, as are Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania and Wes Moore in Maryland. And so it's a very interesting kind of pre-race that's happening right now. The people who are out there sort of running already, like Gavin Newsom, and then you have people like Pritzker who can't. But I think he has a lot of promise. I mean, there's some people who say, oh, I don't know if like a billionaire Jewish guy can ultimately be our nominee. But, I think it's anybody's race right now.
Yeah. John, what do you see?
So I think Rahm Emanuel's fascinating. I think he will help shape the debate on the Democratic side. I'm not sure that there's any segment of the Democratic coalition that he hasn't deeply offended. So I don't rule out anything. We're so early in this process, and Rahm is a good fundraiser, and he's a good communicator, and he scares some people. And
he's been hitting the party hard.
I mean, he's hitting the party hard. But I mean, ultimately, there are a lot of, you go through the segments of the Democratic coalition, you're like, oh, African Americans, Laquan McDonald, is that the right? I think the video. I think that was the name of the young man. The video was withheld. You go through his record on immigration when he was in the Clinton White House, and his basic belief that we should shut down the border and deport a lot of people for political gain, which is which was articulated in memos at the time. I mean, I go through all of the history and I'm like, it's hard to see this guy actually winning a Democratic primary, but I don't rule anything out. It's early and he's got a lot of talent. Pritzker, I feel like Pritzker's in a good place to just kind of keep running for governor of Illinois, keep hitting the president, not being the first person out there in the way that Newsom is, and sort of leading with his chin. I mean, I think that Gavin Newsom 100% won 2025. Yeah. But the question is, who wins 2028 in a Democratic primary? So I don't know. It's just too early. There's a million candidates out there, but I do think Rahm will be interesting in shaping debates. I think he thinks about public policy really deeply, and also understands its nexus with politics in a way that allows him to get out in front of issues. I was surprised to hear him say that he was against the U.S. funding Israel, which is the same position as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which she had to kind of be dragged into. And you look at it and you go, well, if Rahm Emanuel and AOC are in the same place on this, that's almost the full breadth of the Democratic Party's view. I mean, there will be a few that are outside that, but you can already see him being in a place where he's shaping the debate a lot.
And what's interesting about Rahm is, as John said, he does represent this establishment figure in a lot of ways because he was congressman and White House chief of staff and ambassador. So we're in this moment right now where people are, criticizing the establishment. So, and I think he's very aware of that criticism. And so how does he sort of maneuver to escape that? And is he part of the establishment because he hasn't really been an active part of what we've seen recently. It's more of the 1990s and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama's, but we forget that was 20 years ago. So how does he talk about that? And I'm curious to see how he answers those questions and whether he is part of the establishment.
In the category of good news for Rahm, apparently it's totally fine for presidential candidates to say the word fuck every 10 seconds.
Yeah, he does say that a lot.
All the time.
Yeah.
That's his favorite word.
Yeah. He doesn't say it on TV, but he'll say it off.
He will if he runs, I bet. I mean, it is amazing. Like I've never met somebody who's more like intentionally, constantly profane.
Well, Ruben Gallego, the New York Times has said, is leading the charge on profanity. So.
Things I didn't know I was going to learn today. You have this context because you've been covering these people for a couple of decades now. So maybe you could offer up some advice for our student reporters and our college and media students about building sources, going out and reporting, writing stories, but like building up that contact base as you get started.
I mean, my biggest advice is when you're starting out, when you're fresh, and I said this to a class earlier today, learn the topic. Know the player, know the issue that you're talking about, because you don't have the experience necessarily and people don't know you. But if you're asking them questions that show that you've given thought, they will be inclined to help you. Not everybody will be, but some people will be inclined to help you. They'll be inclined to answer the interesting question that you're asking. So if you are, covering a congressional race, like go back and look at the last several members of Congress and how they won those races, and talk to people about how the district lines have changed. If you are, dealing with a water issue, a water contamination issue, go figure out what those environmental regulations are and figure out which companies were or utilities were involved in keeping the water safe, and just know your stuff. As much as possible, because I think that will make people more willing to talk to you. And the other thing is, be inquisitive, ask questions, don't ask angry questions. We used to work with a guy, I'm not going to name him, or I used to work with a guy at The Hill, because I used to work at The Hill newspaper where Amy works now, and I remember him like running up to a cabinet secretary after a vote on the House floor where the cabinet secretary was on the House floor to like lobby members of Congress, which is, it's frowned upon. And the cabinet member like walks off the floor, and this reporter comes running up to him and goes, "Is what you just did the most unethical thing that's ever been done in the history of Congress?" And I just remember thinking, like, no one's ever gonna answer that question, but what if you asked him why it was so important for him to be on the floor? And then let somebody else say whether it's unethical or not. Like, but what was he thinking? Like, just ask questions in a way that is disarming. Talk to people in a way that's disarming. Be human. Another thing I said today, like if I was talking to Colleen today, and by the way, can I just say you guys are so lucky to have Colleen as a professor.
Thank you.
She's a star in our world. Like, I can't even emphasize that enough. A complete star.
I mean, just so incredibly talented and so well connected to the political world and to the television world and the media world. And I just, yeah, you should feel good.
I was the first person to put John on TV, so, or one of the first, so he owes me.
Yeah, she made my parents proud of me. She put me on hardball. So I forget where, but if I was going to ask Colleen about something, like I would notice, like, oh, you're wearing orange and blue today. Oh, did you go to UVA? Did you go to Illinois? Like, what is the, can I find something that somebody's wearing a Yankees cap? Oh, you're a Yankees fan? I mean, like, just try to, like, if you're seeing them in person, like, try to find a way in that's just a little bit personal. And I always think the, like, what were you thinking question, asked in a nice way, not a mean way, is a really good way to get people off of their talking points. Not like, what were you thinking? But like, so what were you thinking when you did this? Also, it's great for a story because it gives you the why. The hardest thing to get in any story is the why. Because people don't want to tell you why they did things. Right? Like, especially in politics. All right, that's my answer. I'm sorry, I'm done. I've been babbling.
I said this earlier in a class, but I think there's so much, I often watch my colleagues ask like 5-part questions, which I think is kind of useless. And first of all, the person answering is gonna forget half the things, and simple is so much better in so many ways. Ask the most simple question and you will get the best answer. I've always found that. And also when you're cultivating sources, don't take someone for granted who is like a low-level aide. Sometimes I get my best information, not from the press secretary, as I also told a class earlier. Press secretaries are kind of useless to what we do. Their job is really to just protect their principal. But to get to know, I remember I broke a bunch of stories during the '08 campaign from people that I had met when I was a regional reporter, and were regional, advanced people who go to a site and they set up a site, and they usually know everything. They know like what's going to happen. They know what the speech might look like. Those are your best sources. Don't take them for granted. And the best part of it is that eventually they grow and they become the chief of staffs and the campaign managers and the finance directors. And you have built this amazing relationship with these people, and they also have trusted you over time. And so I think that is one way to really go about doing reporting. And to also, as John knows, I'm a huge fan of getting the details. I think details make a story. They put you in the room. So ask like the silly questions to help explain something to a reader and put them in a room and make them feel like they're a part of the story. I think it's so important, and I think it's a forgotten art in these, in the age of TikTok and very like short news bites. And just be human. I think, as you said, I think we've lost so much humanity over the course of the last few years, and just be a kind person and show that humanity and write stories that are, not always helpful to people, but that show their strengths and their weaknesses, and to have some sympathy along the way.
Yeah, I think you have to have compassion for the people that you're covering. And that means at some level, all of the people that you're covering. You may disagree with them. You may think that they do bad things. They may actually do bad things. But you should have some compassion for their humanity. And you should, I would argue, one of the ways that you should show your humanity in this world of text messaging and emailing is sometimes pick up the phone, or sometimes sit down and meet with somebody in person. Get to know the people that you're dealing with. It's so many times, whether you're dealing with a boss or a source or whoever, something is lost in the translation of reading text. And we do so much of our job these days through text message. And I try as much as I can to just stop, like I'll be texting back and forth with somebody, to just stop and pick up the phone and hear a human voice and let them hear a human voice. I think it's just good policy for reporting, and I think it helps you with your compassion, again, for the people that you're covering. Like, they are all people, no matter how much they may not treat everybody else that way.
Yeah. Caitlin's got a microphone. If anybody has a question, feel free to throw up your hand. She will come around, Oprah Winfrey style, and come find you.
Can I get a car? Didn't Oprah used to give away cars?
Yeah. I drove you over here. You got a ride.
Hello, my name is Nora. I just have a question about for the midterm elections. I know that specifically for the Democratic Party, there's been a lot of postmortems going around after the 24 election about what went wrong. You guys clearly have your perspective in this book, but are you seeing that the Democrats are learning meaningful lessons from it, or do you think there's a lot of ignorance going into the 26 elections about what happened in the 24 elections?
So just a quick disagree about our perspective. I don't think our perspective is in this book. I think our source's perspective is in the book, and I want to make that clear that that it's heavily reported about what the people who worked on the campaigns thought. Then, of course, we make some judgments in dealing with a wide variety of people, but just wanted to clarify that. And then, Amy, what do you think about lessons learned? You're very deep into the Democratic reckoning.
It's what I'm covering right now. It's a very complicated question you ask, because have they learned their lesson? I'm not sure. And a few months ago, I would have flatly said no. I still think they're playing defense too much. I still think they don't know how to deal with MAGA and Trump, and also have a message, a cohesive message that draws people to them. I still don't think they've figured out why they lost. They won't release an autopsy, as John wrote about recently. They conducted this big, the DNC conducted this big autopsy, and for some reason it's this like state secret that no one has, read.
How brutal is it that it won't come out, John?
I mean, I haven't seen it, but it must be pretty brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, we wrote this book, that's out there, and it has all these things they didn't do right. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things they need to do, and I think Amy's getting at this, is like, who is the Democratic Party? Who are the Democrats? What are they promising? They can tell me all day long that Donald Trump is screwing up the economy or this or that or whatever, but like, if they want to win the midterms, you can win that way. You can be against the guy that's in power. That's a time-tested way to win the midterms. You want to win the presidency? Tell me who you are and where you're taking the country. And I don't see any Democratic candidates that have put that together, that are leading on that. Maybe they don't need to yet, but that's something they're going to have to do effectively. If you know what the Democratic Party stands for and where it's headed right now, please raise your hand. No, I'm curious. Do you feel like you know exactly what they're for? I mean, I'm not... You know what they're against. They got to figure out who the hell they are. Look, they are some things, right? Like we know that they want to keep Social Security and Medicare and abortion rights and like the things that they want to protect, what they want to keep. What are they going to do on AI? What are they going to do on data centers? What are they going to do to push the economy into the next century and allow the American people to continue to have jobs and a reasonable standard of living? What are they going to do? They talk about the 1% all the time. What are they going to do to make sure that when the 1% is making more money, that everybody else comes along? Or that, if the pie gets bigger, it's shared more equally, because that's what they believe. I'm not saying they should do that, but because that's what they talk about, what are the policies that they're going to do to put that in place? And who is the person that can convince not only Democrats, but people who are independents and maybe even some Republicans, that that's actually a good idea? And I haven't seen any evidence of that so far. So for the midterms, they're probably in a reasonably good shape. For 2028, good luck right now. I mean...
Sorry, Amy, I cut you off there.
No. I totally, we talk about this all the time, so John has expressed basically what I feel and what I'm thinking, but...
Aw.
No, it's true. It's like we have a mind meld. We've worked together so long. But yeah, I just haven't seen any evidence of that whatsoever. And I talk to these people all the time. I talk to donors who are so beyond frustrated still. A lot of them won't open their checkbooks. They're so frustrated. One donor that I talk to often is John Morgan, he's a donor in Florida. He's setting up his own party. He's so frustrated with the Democratic Party. I don't see, and elections are about the future, and what are they saying? Gavin Newsom is the front runner right now, kind of tied with Kamala Harris because of name recognition. But what is Newsom even proposing? We haven't yet heard from him on, what his ideas are, and all we've heard from him is he hates Trump and he's stolen, the playbook and is knocking Trump. But what is he for? We don't know. So they have a lot of work to do, I think, going forward, in trying to win back people who were traditionally Democrats, who now support Trump, working class voters, Latino males who were, once again, these are core parts of the Democratic Party. And talk about the issues that they used to talk about. And I think Rahm, to your point, it kind of has said that the Democratic Party has lost its way. They used to talk about issues like Pell Grants and things that affected working class people. And when was the last time you heard them talk about that? It's almost like in many ways they've switched parties. And so they have to find their way back if they want to win. And I always think that they lose their way in thinking, okay, we've won some elections. We ran, and won in Virginia, and we won in New Jersey in the gubernatorial races, and we're going to win the midterms, and yay, we might win the Senate. And then they lose their way after that because they almost get fooled by you know, it's a trick. It's a bag of tricks. And so I think they need to really formulate who they are and present that, and then they'll start kind of moving people back in their direction. But until then, I don't know. I think it's still very much up in the air.
I'm thinking about the title of your book and how nowadays, recently, more MAGA, more conservatives are suspecting that the assassination attempt was a hoax. And so my question is, how do serious journalists, how do journalism students who are serious about this handle what appears to be a conspiracy theory, but in today's media environment, no one is even feeling very sure about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's a conspiracy theory until you find out it's true. Now, you know, so first of all, with regard to the assassination attempt, I think a lot of the things I've seen in the conspiracy theory world on it are like obviously controvertibly wrong, right? I mean, in order to believe in this conspiracy theory, not only do you have to believe that it was possible and coordinated, but you also have to like move flags in the video, and you know what I mean? Like, so I don't believe for a second that this was some sort of staged event where a firefighter was shot. I mean, look, I know people that were there. Like this, I mean, this is ridiculous, and I think it's offensive, this particular conspiracy theory. But a lot of the conspiracy theories are offensive, and I think that what you have to do, as certainly as a journalist, is you kind of pay attention to like what's going on, like in the periphery. And then if you decide that you're going to like investigate something like that, obviously you dig deeply into it. But I think for most of us, you just kind of like listen to what's going on. You make some sort of judgment about the likelihood of veracity of something. And if you find something where you think like there's some evidence that that some story was gotten wrong, or you know that there wasn't a moon or a moon landing or an Artemis II that went and went around the moon, took pictures of the Earth set, or like, I think that for almost all the conspiracy theories I've heard in the course of my life, they're all like pretty easily debunked. But you pay attention. I mean, you keep your ears open. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Amy, but I don't think that there's any chance that Butler was faked, or like any of that at all. And it sounds pretty crazy to me, and you'd have to show me ridiculously overwhelming evidence of the opposite to change my view of that. And I don't think that evidence exists.
Hi, my name is Aiden Mueller. I'm with the Daily Illini as a staff writer. Thank you for coming to talk with us today.
Yeah, we need more of you.
Thank you. UIUC has seen previously pro-Palestine protests, as mentioned in Chapter 11 of Fight, numerous protests seen across college campuses. What, in your opinion, was the Harris-Walz campaign's stance on Gaza, if you had to nail it down, and how did that affect their performance in November?
Hide. I think they didn't want to deal with it. I mean, I think that the short answer is the president of the United States was supporting Israel. The vice president was supportive of what he was doing in Israel. I think she tried to shade her language a little bit when she could, but I think for the most part that it was duck and cover. I can't think of a way in which she really distanced herself from the Biden administration's decisions there, for good and for ill, or however one wants to view it. Some people are supportive of that, some people aren't. But at the end of the day, there was no real daylight between the vice president and the president on that. Much like at the end of the day, there's not really much daylight between President Trump and Vice President Vance on the use of U.S. force and the U.S. The support of U.S. dollars for various foreign policies over time. Like if he were to separate himself later, it would be him claiming that he was, maybe with legitimacy saying that inside the room he said, I didn't think we should go to Iran, but at the end of the day, he supported what the president did. And I think that's true of Harris as well.
I'm curious to see how they handle that issue going forward, though, in 28, because it was such a problem for them figuring out how to position themselves, and as John said, hide. So how do they handle it? Because they offended a lot of people there on this one particular issue. They also don't want to alienate younger people who feel passionately about this. So yeah, they've got a lot of work to do, I think, there in explaining their position.
But I do think to the point we were making before, like take one, like have a position, and follow through on it. Not everything has to be black and white. You have nuanced positions sometimes, but make clear what you stand for and what you don't, and why you stand for the thing that you stand for. And obviously that was criticism. Duck and cover was their stance. But I mean that, what are you telling us about as voters, as Americans? What are you telling us about what you actually believe? And the answer is kind of mishmash.
And look who's running in 28. You have Josh Shapiro, you have J.B. Pritzker, you have Rahm Emanuel. There are people who, will have a lot to explain there. And how do they do that? I think it's even trickier for them.
Can you foresee any kind of party platform position like there used to be back in the olden days?
Well, the DNC was actually recently had a meeting where they basically shot down I actually wasn't covering closely, so I can't get into the details of the resolutions that they basically shot down, but basically moving away from Israel.
Got it.
And so the party was trying to not take really strong positions on that, I think, ahead of 2028. I think they still want to figure out where they are on all of it.
Yeah.
But I think they're recognizing something that is even broader in the American public, which is a greater resistance to foreign spending, period. Whether it's for war, whether it's to support Israel, whether it's to support Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people in this country who are hurting, and you're seeing the politics of that take shape in both parties in different ways, but I think they're both responding to it.
And Trump was kind of a leader on the no foreign spending messaging.
Right,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Jaden. So, as you mentioned earlier, your book relies on more than 150 insiders to reveal a reality very different from the official campaign trail. So, do you feel that behind the scenes kind of investigative books like Fight are now like the only way the public can get an accurate account of who our leaders truly are?
I think it's one of the ways. I think, I try to get as close to the truth as possible during my daily reporting, but as we've mentioned, people won't tell us the full story until after, but I think all kinds, I think products like Fight, there were a number of books that came out too that, shed some more light on that. I think the discussion, an autopsy would be helpful from the party. What else do you think?
I mean, an autopsy might or might not be helpful, depending on how honest they were about the problems.
True.
And the problem that they have is that there are so many stakeholders who continue to be stakeholders. Whether you're talking about the vendors of various services or the DNC members themselves or the campaigns that may be running again. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that they don't want that stuff to come out, but I think most of the Democratic voters would like to know what the hell went wrong. And I would recommend that every single one of them, not to mention every single Republican, every single independent, and every single foreign-born person or foreign living person in the world buy a copy of Fight. Maybe two.
It's been optioned for movie rights, right?
Yeah, so the writer, the woman who optioned our book Fight was the screenwriter for The Devil Wears Prada, both 1 and 2. So we were And she gave us the ultimate compliment saying that our book read like theater, and she's working on something right now.
Yes, we have one final question from the front row here. Yep, from an interested party.
I have to say, this is my son Remy, and he's trailed me all day long, and he's been so patient, and I'm so proud of him.
So, as you said, Trump will probably try to get either himself or Vance to be president in 2028. So, like, now it's like war and like gas prices. So, do you think like in 2028 he won't worry about putting everybody on war and like he'll try to like get either himself as president again, even though you can't be president for more than 8 years, or he'll try to get Vance to do it. Plus, like, I actually saw a thing today. Trump said that his secretary was wrong when he said gas prices will be back to normal within 1 year. But I feel like he's wrong, and he's been lying with all of his campaign promises. So in 2028, do you think Trump will try to get himself as president for the 3rd time, or do you think he'll get Vance to be president for the next 8 years?
Mom?
Well, that's a lot. I think that Remy, I don't think he's going to run again, but I think he's going to want someone who will, be Trumpy, for lack of a better word, and he cares about what his legacy will be.
That's why I said he might get Vance.
Yes, exactly.
My expectation is that he will withhold his love for as long as possible in order to get the candidates who might want to be the Republican nominee to beg him for his support. So whether that's J.D. Vance or Secretary of State Marco Rubio or anybody else, my guess is that Trump will actually play them off of each other and try to get them to promise that their support for all of the legacy items that he wants going forward.
He loves a horse race more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Theater. Well, Amie Parnes, Jonathan Allen, thank you so much for being here today and talking with so many of our students throughout the day. We're so grateful. And
Professor King, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you all for being here, and thank you to our online audience. We had a bunch of people register for the Zoom, so thank you for logging in, and have a great night. Thank you.